All right, welcome to 7-3 Garage. Today I'm going to show how I installed the left side and coil over into my F250 97 7.3 diesel. This is the leaf spring delete kit that comes from Solo, and this kit specifically is integrated with the Dana 50 TTB suspension. And the right side I've installed already. I've filmed most of that, and I'm going to be posting that soon. But this side's kind of bare. I really just have my castle nut and my knuckle installed. I'm not going to show you guys how to install a knuckle onto here. It's pretty simple, but I will show you the basics. And then we're also going to go over some of the hardware. So let's just kind of dive into it before I install this big heavy duty super spring here. So some of the hardware and or tools that you're going to need right off the bat. You're gonna need an 1/8" big old open-ended wrench. So this guy fits right on top of this. So to show you what this piece is, so it really is just a giant nut, and it's got a nut protruding into it. It goes into here. This is all threaded in at an 1/8", and you're gonna need this to torque this down. This holds your radius arm, which is connected to your body. Okay, the chassis itself, and then your coil over it, and your spring dampens in right here. So just right off the bat, some tips you're going to need to know. This thing comes too long from the factory. It's too long, and it doesn't meet the threading criteria that goes into here. So he tells you right off the bat you got to cut off about this many threads, which is about 4 to 5 threads off this side. And this side is thicker than this side in threading, and it goes directly inside. The same thing is accounted for underneath here, where you've got another bolt that is about half that size, and you have to cut that down as well. Now, full disclosure, guys, the bottom and the top on this is a pain to get in line, and you really have to work on it hard. You need a mallet. You need at least a 3 or 4 ton jack down here to level it out. And you really want to make sure that you get it perfect, because if you don't, it's not going to line up. So one other thing you need to know too, down here by your jam nut and your heim, and I'll go over how this is installed, there's about 3 or 4 threads left on here where that jam nut connects to the heim joint. You have to have that many in order to meet this exact distance right here. So that's kind of like step number 1, okay? Do all that stuff. The very first step that you do in the kit, though, I will say, is actually boring the holes through the frame. And I'll show you guys how you do that, but you'll notice something's missing right here. And that is my leaf spring pivot point. It does not exist. I cut it out. And the reason being is you have to cut this piece off right here. If it don't, it's going to contact as this thing swivels up and down. So your original coil is going to have to come out, and I didn't do a pretty job of it. I'm going to come back and drive those out, but because of their location, I don't have air tools on me. Like I said, I'm a pretty rudimentary guy. I will probably come back and fix this later on, but for now, I'm just trying to get it road ready. That's all I'm really trying to do. So that's step number 1, right? Get those things out of the way first. Boring your holes is the biggest and most important thing you can do, getting those accurate. And I believe it's 6 1/4 inches from the first hole in the housing. Now, that's that first bolt right there. And I'll post a link to these description of exactly where these measurements go, just for this kit alone, all right? So you're probably wondering, all right, how did you get to this point? How long did it take? Well, I'm a guy who works 60 hours a week at my current job. I'm an engineer, so I don't really have a lot of spare time on my hands. So every chance that I do get is either late at night or on the weekends when I'm working on this truck. So to be honest with you, if you have all the tools, you have all the down parts, you could probably get this done in maybe 2 weeks if you've already yanked out your lower. If you haven't yanked out any of these down parts, you're looking at a lot of work. So it took me, not working every single day, obviously. If I did, I probably would have been done months ago. It took me like 3 or 4 months to get all this done. And a lot of that was sourcing parts. Couldn't find the parts that I needed. Couldn't find the right bolts or the right U-joints. And then also, you know, money's not plentiful either. So that's why I made this video. I figured it'd be good for those people that, you know, aren't super rich. You know, you're just looking for something to make your ride better, make the F-250, you know, modern from the bottom up, you know, but old school on the outside, right? That's how I roll. So a lot of your parts down here, I'm just gonna show you some tips, all right? So with the pumpkin itself, don't ever mount this beam up on its own to the pivot joint without this, all right? The reason why I say you don't want your Dana 50 attached is you, Bob, and Alex, whoever's gonna be helping you mount this thing up, you're not gonna be able to get these holes completely mounted up perfectly while you're putting gasket sealer on the inside, at the back side of this axle. So you can see down here, all these are bolted in completely, and you can see some of my gasket sealers squirting out. That's because I poured it inside the holes and I bored straight through and started threading it down. And you're probably wondering, all right, how did he do it? So the biggest, most important thing I can say with these is you really need to make sure that you have a vice grip, like a big vice grip you can put on the ground. And you want to put it on this right here, right on this guy. Wrap the teeth around it or the face of both faces, and then turn it on its vertical axis and let these hold it. That's going to keep your axle flat. And then come through with the, I can't remember what I think these are 3/8" bolts. I think MPT 20, I think, or 16. I think it's 18. Sorry, 18 is what the threading is on these, I believe. Could be wrong. Don't quote me on that. So these bolts, you want to cut off the head, find one at like Home Depot or O'Reilly's or whatever, find the exact same threading, cut off the head, and then thread 1, 2, 3, 4 in. And then when this thing is sitting on the ground, you'll just lower it on top of it after it's already been sealed. The axle, the housing itself has already been sealed. And then you'll be able to get an accurate placement of this axle and then start torquing all these down in, you know, a crisscross pattern, as you know. And I'm not going to go over specs on that. These are pretty easy to grade 8 bolts. There's nothing out of the ordinary on a torquing. So that's tip number 1, right? That's one of the hardest things you can do, is getting this thing in here. Now, if you're alone like me and you don't have a lot of time to call the buddy or whatever, I live out in the outskirts of town, up here in Michigan, so I'm pretty far from most of my coworkers, so it's hard to get people over here. I live an hour away from everybody I know. So nobody really wants to drive out here and do mechanic work. So it's pretty important that you find a way to jimmy this up. So I've been fortunate. I've got this bench right here, this workbench. It's nothing powerful, but it's rated about 400 pounds. A really fat dude could sit on top of this thing. Put this guy underneath it, put your axle on there on the housing, and you can slide it straight over to the rail and bolt it up. That's like the easiest thing I could do. It was a pain in the neck. And then you got to get it aligned and then just pop it straight through with a mallet or a hammer, that pin over there on the other side. And that'll hold all the weight, and you won't have to worry about calling all your buddies to get this thing aligned. So that's step number 1. Okay, get those things out of the way before you start your install. Now I'm going to put you off to the side here. So a lot of the things you're going to see have already been pre-done by me. All right, I drilled these holes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 holes. Now I will say this: there is a brake line right here. Can't see it past my hand, but here, I'll bring you closer here. I have cut this brake line off, the mount bracket for it. Originally it was back here. Now, a couple things you need to know about these housings that you're going to get from Solo. They're not top of the line stuff, all right? They are tough, but they are not top of the line. It's made in China, all right? It's temporary. It's not going to be my main fix. I'm going to put a 4-bolt tower in there later on. But I will say this, all right? This is an octagon piece that you got right here. Well, it's 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm sorry. It's a 6-sided piece that you've got. This bracket that's connecting to your braided brake line, your extended brake lines that come in his kit, all right? Normally these would fit with an OEM, but they don't. This hole does not. For whatever reason, I couldn't get it to fit. And there's a retainer clip on the back side here. You can kind of see that gold clip. It has to clip on the inside of this surface in order for this line to stay stiff. And it's very important that it stays stiff. Otherwise, you're going to get all this play and eventually you're gonna get a lot of wear and your brake lines are gonna shear off. And you don't want that while you're going down the highway. So I had to take a step bit and drill into this metal a little bit, about 1/8 of an inch, well, not 1/8 of an inch, I'm sorry, 2/16 of an inch straight into the steel at the same exact diameter of this one, which is kind of a guess game, and get this to hold just enough so that I could get that where is it at? That bracket connected. You can kind of see it. Anyway, yeah, right about there. See that gold bracket heading out right here? Those are your clips. You can pop those out with a small mallet and a ballpoint hammer, okay? Same exact thing that I used to get it in. Another thing you should know, this brake line is not facing its original orientation. I had to twist this brake line to get to this orientation. Once you get those things off of the chassis and drilled down, you got another headache on your hands. The next headache is you got these big fat rivets that are gonna be in your way. This one specifically is not, but this holds the engine mount up. This is the cross member. You've got 2 more right here, and I had to drill out one right here and just drive it flush. It's still in there, but it's flush. And the reason it's flush is this whole mount fits flush to the frame. I chose holes specifically that were not aligned with these bolts on purpose because I did not have the ability to bore straight through some of this stuff with a heavy enough torch or any other mallet or something like that, an air hammer. If you got an air hammer, you should drive these out at these specific holes. But you're gonna notice, like I screwed up right here. I'm gonna come back with my my MIG and fill this up. But right now, this is the fix. This is a pilot hole that I had drilled. There was a rivet right here, and I realized I couldn't get through it. The reason I couldn't get through it is on the back side here, where these mounts sit, you're driving through twice the amount of steel, and these bolts are only, I don't know about that long. So you don't have a lot to work with. And you got the housing coming in this way. So you really got to be precise which holes you choose. And so, like I said, use me as an example of what ones you don't pick. It doesn't say or matter when I called solo. It doesn't specifically matter which holes you pick. All right, they're all structurally strong. This is just a placeholder. Honestly, a lot of your weight and your shear force is going to be placed on these guys. But it's still very important you get at least 2 bolts down here. So, if I could do it all over again, buy yourself an air hammer, get these, rivets out of the frame, and then bore straight through to those. And you really should be out there, but this side just did not work out the way I wanted it to. But not a big deal. Structurally sound, honestly, very, very strong piece. It'll be fine either way. Now, the next thing you need to know is this hole is about half the size of it. This is where your retainer clip's gonna go. Now, probably wondering what the heck is a retainer clip. For those of you who've never messed with it, it's a very funky looking piece. I'm not a fan of them. The reason I'm not a fan is I'll show you. They do not fit flush. They're supposed to fit like that, and then you're supposed to be able to drill it down. As you can see, that is not wide enough to fit my Super Duty spring in there, or my coilover, excuse me, and then it bolts straight. So you kind of end up offset like this. So how do you fix that? All right, there's a couple things you could do. You could take a torch and you could try to bend this down, and you come in with it a little bit more so that this side is closer to this side so you can bolt it in. You cannot do that with this piece if you just got a mallet or a hammer in the garage and some concrete. So there's a couple of ways you can kind of remedy it. One is to bore out the hole a little larger. I don't want to mess with this piece specifically. I would rather bore out this, get this at a larger diameter, and then put it in here. You have to have your coilover all the way down, and I'll install this piece later on and I'll show you what I'm talking about. But you have to get it all the way down, and then you start driving it up, because I am not using coil spring, what do they call it? The tool that you buy at O'Reilly's. I'm drawing blanks today. Regardless, that hole does not come at that size, and the reason why is it gives you this grade 8 bolt. I don't know, looks like about 1/8 of an inch, maybe in a 1/16 or more. It's not very big, okay? And it's not, honestly, I would trust these over it any day. This is almost double the size of that bolt, and it's a lot longer. Therefore, you can reach through and make it all the way through, and then you'll get it through, and then you'll have your retainer spring. This plays a very important role. Do not forget this piece.